want to wish each and every one of you a good day, a good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast, a good morning to those on the West Coast and Central Time Zone. Those who are following from Israel and Europe and parts abroad, a good evening. This is pre-recorded, and you'll understand why. Today, I mean, we're humbled, we're honored, and we're blessed to be with Omer Neutra's parents, with Orna and Ronen Neutra. They live in Long Island. They raised Omer in Long Island. And today is Memorial Day. It's Memorial Day here in the United States, which unfortunately, the majority of Americans don't view this as a day of gratitude, don't view this as a solemn day. In the Neutra home, every day is a solemn day, and every day is a Memorial Day. And we're recording it as the Neutras today have an op-ed in the New York Post that talks about Memorial Day, that speaks about their son, and speaks about what it means to lose a soldier. At this point, we're going to hand it over to Ronen, to Orna, two people that many of you have seen. You've seen them with presidents, you've seen them with senators, you've seen them as parents, you've seen them really as people with the most incredible fortitude, incredible determination. And to have to lose a child under these conditions and not even have the ability to bury a child and come to closure is just the most unthinkable horror and evil. And the Neutras are going to share who was Omer, what was Omer, Omer the person, not just a name, not just a statistic, but the human being Omer, as a young man, as a child, as a soldier who wanted to support the Jewish people and support Israel. And as well, they're going to be sharing with us just the unthinkable experience they've had over the last 600 days. To Orna, to Ronen, please.
Thank you. As I'm thinking about Omer and when he came to this world, it's pretty chilling, honestly. I was 9 months pregnant with Omer in New York City during the 9/11 attacks. And I remember that day having to get out of the city back to where we lived at the time, which was Queens, with no public transportation, with a huge belly and a baby in my belly, just thinking, how do I get this child to safety? And to think that 21 years later, he was killed by the same ideology is just unfathomable. At the time we lived in the city, when Omar was a year old, we moved to Long Island. Very nice, warm community. Omer grew up in Jewish education. He completed 12 years in Salman Schechter. That had a very big impact on him. They were true partners to us in raising our children. And this community we were very involved in, and Omer felt very much a part of it in our local community in Plainview as well. As he grew up, he started to show signs of becoming a young leader. And during high school, you could see that happening as he grew up physically. He was this big guy with a big smile, very, very friendly, very social, but also, very caring about people around him and how they felt. And, never it took too much space, although physically he took the space, he made sure to make space for other people and to include them. At some point, he became the captain of the 3 school sports teams: soccer, basketball, volleyball. It's a small school. And wherever he was needed, he always stepped up. He was very, very involved in his youth group, USY. And over the course of high school, he took different leadership roles until finally, during his senior year, he became the president of New York metro area for USY. Always with a smile, always kind-hearted, sense of humor. The first one to walk in and just, crack the ice, make everyone feel comfortable, whether it was a new teacher in class, whether it was new children that were coming to a USY event. That's the kind of kid that he was. And to us as parents, you know, like many other kids, always busy, always messy room, you know, just a normal kid.
The inspiration he had to join Tzahal.
So Omar, at the age of 18, we talked about, you know, college and plans for the future. And even though it was accepted to Binghamton University, upstate New York, we discussed together and agreed that it could be very good for Omer to go to Israel for a gap year. And Omer decided he didn't want to do it in a program that is for American kids per se, because he's been in those programs all over the place. He's done Jewish camps. He's done JNF program in Israel as a delegation. So we decided to join a mechina, and this is a mechina kdam tzvait. It's a pre-army program, mostly for Israeli kids, about 50, 60 Israeli kids, few Americans and international kids like Omer that join. There were only, I think, 5. So the program is in Hebrew, and you have to deal with, you know, managing with that. But Omer, with his education, his knowledge, obviously we're Israeli Americans, so we speak Hebrew at home, had no problem with that. And once he landed in this program, it took him few weeks to feel completely Israeli. He immersed within those kids. He loved rolling around on grass with them and sitting in classroom a minute later, even with the most serious debates on democracy, on politics, on the Middle East. And through this experience, he really fell in love with the people, and they traveled a lot. They spent some volunteer time in different groups. They met you know, settlers, and they met ultra-Orthodox, and they met Arabs and Palestinians, and they met them all. And it was a really immersive experience. And toward the end of it, even though it was COVID time, he came home. They closed the program for a few weeks. He came home, and he was debating with us, and he said, you know, all my friends are joining the army. They have to. It's compulsory. I have an option. You know, Binghamton is waiting, but I'm very conflicted. I don't think I can go back. It took him some time and some deliberation, but once he landed back in Israel to finish the program, he just joined Garin Tzabal, which is the program for IDF non-Israelis that are making Aliyah, becoming non-soldiers and coming to Israel. And he joined that program of Garin Tzabal. They moved from the Mechina into the Garin. The Mechina was in Kfar Anasi, a kibbutz in the north, and the Garin was in Afikim, also in the north. One is in the north of Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee, and the other one is in the south. And he was also convinced that you know, going to become a pilot or joining the commando forces, that's, you know, all these elite forces, you need high quality soldiers in the known regular battalions. And that's why I decided to join Shirion, the arms corps, as a potential future tank commander. And soon enough, he just finished the course. They really identified his leadership, and he became a tank commander. And because he's so good with people, they asked him to stay and become a trainer of the future tank commanders. And he did that for 8 months, which was very difficult. You know, the trainer has to sit outside the tank and tell the tank commander what to do, driving in the deserts, eating a lot of dust. His eyes were always so red and so inflamed, but he never complained. He loved that job. And at the end of that period, he was convinced to go to the officers course, something that most lone soldiers don't do, because it requires an extension and real deep understanding of the army, of the language, of the culture. And he did that, and he finished the officers course, and we were very proud. And at the end of it, he was offered to become a trainer of the future officer course trainees. But he refused that. He said, I studied, I know this profession so well. I need to do the real thing. I need to be on the front lines. And that's when he was posted with his team. He got a team of soldiers, and he was posted just on the border with Gaza, between Nirim and Niroz, two kibbutzim, two small farm-like communities. There's a little post there that's called the White House, strangely, Habayit Lavan. And he was the commander of the post, in charge of 2 tanks and a small group of Golani soldiers.
And that's when I stopped sleeping.
Yeah. And that's where he met Idan Alexander, that joined him there as a lone soldier as well.
Just for our participants, the program that Omer was on, the Mechina, in Israel, that's really la creme de la creme. The young men and the young women who take off a year before going into the army join these programs. These programs that emerge out of them usually are going to be the future leadership of Israel, really the finest of the fine. And in the fact that Omer wanted to be part of that just gives us, is those listening to Orna and listening to Ronen, gives us an insight into who he was. And the other point that Ronen made is that here he didn't have to, but he went to officers training school. He became an officer. And then instead of taking the job of training others, he literally put himself on the front line. It gives you a sense of the man's leadership, of the man's determination, and of the man's internal fiber as a Jew and as a human being. Just for us listening, little facts like that, we never knew Omer, but it gives us an insight into who he was.
Right. I think also, if I can elaborate a little bit, both Ronen's father and my father are Holocaust survivors. They lost most of their families in the war, and they were able, through their parents, with smartness and courage, to find their way to survive the war, to fight back, to get to Israel, to be of the founding members of the country. And we have a very large family in Israel. And Omer grew up on these stories. He had 2 grandparents that were Holocaust survivors. He understood the importance of Israel as a Jewish state. And he, to his core, loved the country. He was very connected to it. When we suggested, Omer, it might be a good idea for you to spend a year in Israel, we saw that in him. I'm not sure he saw that in himself, although everyone else saw it in him. Everywhere he was, he spoke about Israel, about his love for Israel. In USY, he always took those roles of connecting the other youth to Israel, talking. He used to talk about Israel. He'd say, now let me talk about my true passion, Israel, my girlfriend. He really had that in his core. And that was also part of the reason where we said a gap year. He said, okay, I've done all the American gap years. I want to do something that Israeli kids do. I want to experience what they experience. So that was him. And you're right. It's a leadership program. That's what it is. And I think the connection with those kids, that crème de la crème, really spoke to him. He felt, wow, this is who I am. This is who I want to be. And that was a big motivator for him. That year was in this gap year in the Mechina was a life changer year for him.
Where in Europe are your families from? You mentioned that he's got 2 grandparents who are survivors.
Right.
Yeah, so my father was a very small child at the time. My grandfather was in Sarajevo in Yugoslavia, and he was an engineer, a very talented one, and they tried to keep him as long as they could until they knew the Nazis are coming to town and they may take them. So he got a notice that he has to run to the forest with a family, or else they're going to be taken to Auschwitz or wherever. He took my father and his wife, my grandmother, and they ran to the forest. And being the talented engineer that he got the job of exploding German trains. So they were running with the partisans, hiding in the forest, and during the nights were putting all kind of explosives and trying to put off the trains, and basically survived throughout the whole war in the forest until they were liberated. And at 49, they decided to move to Israel. And as Orna said, they were one of the people who actually built the country. My grandfather was the chief engineer of Nesher, a cement and concrete company, and my father was the chief in charge of all the electric lines in the electric company, as one of the chief engineers of the electric grid. So yeah, we always knew those stories, and Omer grew up with the notion that democracy in Israel must be protected. It's cherished, and I think that's we are speaking right now. It's Memorial Day, and I think that's one of our messaging really that we are putting out. We can't take democracy for granted, and we can't take our freedom for granted. People have to protect it. And Omar had that burning, eager desire to protect Israel freedom, which also, like Orna said, with 9/11, has an implication here. We came from Israel 25 years ago, just after the Intifada, and we thought we're coming to the safest place on earth just because we moved here. And then a couple of years later, the biggest attack on New York, on US soil happened, and we were experiencing it firsthand, where Orna had to cross the Queensboro Bridge on with a big belly because there was no transportation. And later on, our son is involved in the biggest attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust in Israel. So
New York City was full of posters of missing people. It's just chilling,
and now it's full of posters of all the hostages.
And now people are taking off the posters, which is another insanity. What's going on here? My family, my father grew up in Czechoslovakia, in a small town, really small town on the border with Poland. And my grandfather lost his siblings, lost his parents in the war, was able to save my father, my aunt, and my grandmother. He literally pulled them off the train more than once, and they hid in a farming village for a few months during 1943 until the end of the war, and then they moved back to Czechoslovakia, and from there to Israel. So yeah, but no one, we say he grew up on these stories, which he did, but no one understood them the way we understand them today, right? We grew up with Israel as a given fact, and I think this war shook everything up, and everything that's happening to us right now is completely given different meaning. But for months, we thought Omer was alive.
I want to take us about that. I want to take us back to the month before October 7th. It was a holiday month of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Omer and his team were working on the border 18, 20 hours a day. Hamas was sending all kind of little explosives and all kind of destructions, and the tanks were going up and down the border. And then shortly before Simchat Torah, we speak with Omer, and he's telling us things are calming down. There's no more riots. And actually, we are told that it's going to be a very peaceful Simchat Torah. I'm looking forward to spend the time with my team and just have a good
team building. That's where his head was the evening before.
And that's when we spoke to him the last time. I'm looking forward. I will speak tomorrow. Have a good Simchat Torah, we told him, and that's how we departed. And just a few hours later, it's 11:30 in New York, 6:30 in
30 a.m.
a.m. in Israel. Just before we go to sleep, we start to see missiles flying, notices on our phones that there are missiles flying all over and that there's a ground invasion. Knowing that Omer is there, we were immediately, what's going on? And we try to call him. 6:30, I try to call Omer. He didn't respond. Today we know that they were already in the tanks on the border, on the way to the border, busy. The missiles start flying by around them. And we were awake all night trying to figure out what's happening without any response, looking at the news. We knew something is terrible is happening, but we didn't know the extent of it. We didn't know where it was. We thought Omer was fighting. That's why he's not answering us. And it took us a good amount of hours, but at the same day, we got to learn that Omer's tank was found burning and empty
On the border.
on the border, just one of the bridges.
And then some information came to us that there was a video that Hamas put out among the many atrocious videos that they were spreading around on Telegram, showing Omer and his team being removed from the tank. It took us maybe 2 months before we were able to personally view that video, but we had a friend come over and look at it. And Omer was really a commander of 2 tanks and a group of Golani soldiers. And the second tank commander, which was under Omer, identified the team being pulled out of the tank.
On the video.
On the video. And he reached out to us. He said, this is them. I see them. And by Sunday evening, we had a knock on the door here in New York from the consulate, the Israeli consulate, confirming what we already heard from informal channels before, that they're considered to be kidnapped and taken into Gaza, that they were taken into Gaza.
There was a real chaos in Israel. We couldn't get too many answers. We didn't know who's involved. It took a few days to learn that actually close to 250 people taken as a hostage, and to understand the extent of the death and destruction and the atrocities that happened that day. It took a few days. But we were all concerned, obviously, for the well-being of Omer and try to understand, what can we do? And really, the same day we decided that we are living in New York. Omer is an American. Our best option is to try and approach the U.S. administration and make them aware that there are Americans in Gaza taken hostage, and that something must be done. Something must be done to help Israel.
And soon enough, we realized that there were other American citizens that were involved in this, in the attack. There were 45 Americans murdered on October 7th. There were 12 taken hostage throughout that week. Somehow we found each other. They approached the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv. We, from here, wrote a letter on Sunday, October 8th, and we passed it through our community and our senator, to our Senator Schumer, to the White House. Basically on Sunday evening, Secretary Blinken and the White House had a letter from us indicating that it's not yet formal, but that we understand from unofficial channels that Omer, who is an American, has been taken hostage and is kidnapped into Gaza. So, and we know now that that started moving the government, mobilizing the government over here, understanding that Americans are involved and that they need to mobilize. And we know how things evolved during that week. President Biden came to Israel that week, and we, on I believe Thursday or Friday of that first week, we had our first call with the president. It was a Zoom call. There were family members from Israel. We were on the call. There were quite a few people that didn't know what happened to their loved ones. During the call, I remember it was horrific. One of the people on the call received a knock on her door as we were on the call with the president, telling her that her daughter was murdered. It was just horrific. This call, which was meant to be a briefing of 10 minutes, ended up being almost 2-hour call with the families. And the president was very patient, and he, people were screaming, crying. He said, I'm here, and tell me about your family members. And I remember talking to him and telling him about Omer, and I will never forget her response to me on that first week. He said to me, sometimes I feel we raise our kids too well. And that stuck with me for a very long time. That was the first week. Just trying to figure out what happened, who was against who. And we also, Ronen said, became kind of our strategy. There was so much chaos in Israel. There were so many families. And here in the United States, it was just us and Idan Alexander's family. So we understand that we have a role together with other American families, citizens that were living in Israel, to make sure that the government here is taking a lead, is involved, and is doing whatever they can to help resolve the situation. And that's what we did for months. We've been in Washington over 30 times over the course of these 20 months. We've met with senators and congressmen. We were in the White House multiple times. And at some point, we had a continuous relationship with the National Security Council, ongoing updates and brainstorming. And they were always of the approach that the family members should have a voice, that some of the most creative ideas come from family members. And that really led them in the relationship with us as families from the beginning. And it was a very meaningful relationship for a very long time. For 14 months, we believed Omer was alive. And we fought to get him back alive. We were, like you mentioned in the introduction, we met with anyone and everywhere. We were on every stage possible, big and small, on the media hundreds of times, doing whatever we could until December 1st of 2024, where after 421 days, where Omer was considered a mystery, because the IDF had that movie of him taken out of the tank, but there was no information after that. On day 421, they shared with us some new information that based on it, they concluded that he wasn't alive and that he was actually killed on October 7th. And that was shattering for us.
Yeah, just another little spotlight on Omer. We've been in touch, obviously, with the IDF and with Omer's commanders, and we met also with Chief of Staff multiple times, with the head of Shin Bet, Ronen multiple times, and anybody dealing with the release of hostages. At one point, they invited us to listen to the recording of the tank from the morning.
From the black.
There is a black box in the tank, like in aircraft, and everything was recorded. And one thing that was evident was how much Omer took care of his soldiers in the last few minutes. When their tank was hit by an RPG and multiple explosives and basically couldn't go anymore. The tank was really under flames and they were choking inside. And you can hear Omer telling his team, take the air condition outlets and only breathe through them, fresh air. And so his team did. When I'm saying his team, unfortunately, the RPG and the explosives killed the driver on the spot. So there were two more soldiers, Nimrod Cohen and Oz Daniel, and both of them are shown taking out of the tank in complete well condition, while Omer telling his team to breathe through those air conditioning didn't do the same thing. He continued to be calling for help. I have a wounded soldier. We need rescue. We need rescue. And he was calling for minutes and minutes for rescue instead of breathing like the rest through the air conditioning. And we are told that based on the information they have with the IDF, Omer probably died out of suffocation, breathing the smoke, while his two soldiers came out alive. Nimrod Cohen is considered a living hostage soldier, IDF soldier, still in captivity. Right now in day 598. There are signs of life. He's seen on videos. He's alive. Oz Daniel came out of the tank, and a few months later, his parents were shown a video where he was fighting the terrorist, trying to take a grenade out of their body. And once he was fighting them, they shot him dead.
They're still holding on to his body as well.
His body is still in Gaza, considered, like Omer, a deceased hostage. But we are told that Omer probably died a few hours in captivity after he was taken in semi-conscious condition just because he was not getting any medical help, oxygen and so on. And he probably died a few hours later due to this condition. But it just shows his true character. And he took care of his team, even in the last minutes.
Can I ask you about Omer's siblings, your other children?
Omer has one brother here in the United States. They were very close. They're only 2.5 years apart. And for all of us, really, life as we knew it stopped on October 7th. Daniel was a college student. He was on campus on October 7th in the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. And Ronen called him on the morning, Shabbat morning, and he said, Omer's missing. And of course, he was in shock. He spent most of the day watching these insane videos online that were, showing what Hamas was doing. Very isolated. The world around him continued as usual. I remember it was Chag, and I tried to reach out to Hillel on campus and get someone to reach out to him and come over so that he's not alone, assuming also that there were other Israeli kids, Jewish kids on campus that were probably feeling the same thing. And after a few days on campus, we realized that this is an ongoing event, and we brought him home. And he's been home since, trying to complete his coursework at the time, which is insane. Thinking of it in hindsight, he was a a full in-person student, and he had to finish up that semester on his own from home with everything that was going on here. And from that moment on, he's been home taking some classes virtually, trying to somehow continue with his life and his academics, but also be a part of what we're going through. He's been with us to Washington. He has spoken publicly as well, multiple times. This changed his life. We're hoping that, we kept hoping that the situation would resolve, that there would be some closure, but it hasn't happened. And as a family, we decided that next fall he would probably go back to campus, but closer to home. He's not going back to Illinois. So, this is very, very, it's a heavy load on a young man's soldiers. It's his brother. They were both together when Ronen mentioned winter of 2023 when Omer was an officer. Daniel also was in a gap year in Israel, also in a mechina, a different kind of mechina, more international and shorter. And Daniel made his decision that he was going to go back and study here. But after a few years where Omer was really away, right? He was away since 2019 in the army, in Mechina, in everything that he was doing. In 2023, they were together in Israel, and they had an opportunity to reconnect. Daniel was older, he finished high school, and we're very thankful for that they had this opportunity to be together during that year before this happened.
Well, this time together was really rewarding for all of us because we stayed almost 6 months in Israel, and we were supporting Omer when he was training for the officers course, and close to Daniel as well. So it was really special to be together like this, do for a lone soldier what most Israeli parents are doing, feeding them when they come home finally every couple of weeks, doing their laundry, helping them with all their needs. So we felt really good being there for them. But we also saw the tension that was growing in Israel, the huge demonstrations in the streets, the weakness that Israel was showing from within. And honestly, I was very concerned. I told Omer, you got to be careful. Something is going to happen. Our enemies are watching this. Something is going to happen.
It felt imminent. It was horrible. I mean, like Onen said, we had an opportunity. Both of the kids were in Israel. We said, this is our opportunity to be there for Omer, to be closer to him. And we're so grateful for that intuition, for being able to do that. We were there for a few months, like Onen said, and we saw the country unraveling. It was really, really scary. It was really scary. It was scary to leave him there.
But Omer, like an officer in the IDF, his answer to me was, Abba, I know we're preparing for a war with Hezbollah in the north, but I'm next to Gaza. Hamas is not going to attack. I'm not aware of anything. In fact, what we said before Simchat Torah, they thought it's over. So the notion was, if there will be a major outbreak, it's going to come from the north, not from Gaza. That's an officer in the IDF. That's what he told his dad.
A young officer.
And a young officer. That's right. As far as he knew.
Right.
So obviously now we know that there was a serious preparation and a real army that came through. There were 60 breaches of the fence. 60 breaches of the fence, and 3,500 experienced, well-trained, well-equipped terrorists came into Israel through the border. The army was not prepared for that. Anybody that rushed like Omer to the border defended with their body until the last minute, until they lost all their MU, and did whatever they could to try and stop it. And honestly, we just participated in a show this weekend where Idan Ahmedi, a very prominent Israeli singer, also an actor in Fauda, he was in the Hamptons and invited us to come and see his show. And when he knew that we were there, he was speaking briefly about Omer. And he said, because of people like Omer, Tel Aviv and Jerusalem were not attacked that morning. They stopped with their bodies. And we only lost what we lost that day because of those brave hero soldiers.
But they were prepared for the worst case scenario, breaches from 2 points on the border with 4 terrorists. This was not what they were being prepared for. It's very sad.
We had a Shabak interrogator speak to us, and he says that he was called up for reserve duty. He says Ronen Bar got on, and he says, after this, I'm going to resign because I have failed, we failed our people, our country, our nation. He says, right now we have a war, and we have to do everything we can to save our country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's really incredible to see the success of the IDF against Hezbollah in the north, the changes in Syria, even the strikes that Israel made in Iran, and the power we're showing against the Houthis and the resiliency. But throughout this whole process, we still have 58 hostages, close to 2 years, almost 600 days. By the time you watch this, it's probably going to be over 600 days in captivity. 20 of them are in the most horrible condition, and yet we can't get them out.
20 of them are alive.
20 of them are alive, sorry, and over 35 of them are considered deceased. They all need to come back. I mean, we gotta get Omer to a proper burial in Israel. We don't have our closure. So many families don't have our closure, and this is an open wound in the Israeli society, because when we send Omer to Israel, we knew that these values of taking care of each other, of not leaving anybody behind, that's a very basic element in the Israeli culture and in the Jewish tradition. Not having them back is not an option. And if Israel is not capable of bringing them back or reaching an agreement or taking them home, we have a serious long-term issue within society.
As we started in our first visit to Israel, we connected with families of other soldiers that were taken hostage. And I remember the first meeting, family of Hadal Goldin was in that meeting. Their son was killed and taken hostage in 2016.
14.
2014, you're right, sorry. They came to that meeting, and we were looking, what are they doing here? How come they're here? And they said, we're here so that you don't find yourself in our situation. 10.5 years. And they haven't stopped fighting to get his remains back. And they've been saying, that a country that does not bring back their fallen soldiers will end up not bringing back the wounded and the alive. And we're seeing that happening, and it's just horrendous. And it's not the Israeli values that we raised Omer on, and is not the way we grew up. It goes against everything that we know. And we know that Israel's national security and resilience is not just the strength of or the technology of the Air Force or the tanks. It's about its people first and foremost.
It's
It's
about
about that
other.
bond, and it's about that special fabric of between the people, the commitment to each other, the knowledge that when you send your kid to the army, that the army and the government will do everything to make sure that they come back home. And it's all very, very fragile right now. People have lost the trust.
And yet, we met so many soldiers that are fighting and that are telling us the reason why we fight in Gaza is that the first and highest reason is to bring back your son and the other hostages. This is the top reason. Yes, we have to eliminate Hamas, and we will. But this is not as critical right now in the point of time that we are as bringing those kids back.
As a people, we sanctify life. I think we always pride ourselves in differentiating, from some of our neighbors. It's a tough neighborhood, but it has to show in action. We have to bring them back. My father was a living Holocaust survivor. He's been interviewed multiple times, and he said, I don't feel that we're in the same condition as we were in the Holocaust, right? We do have a Jewish state. We do have an army. We can defend ourselves. We can fight back. So we should be strong enough to be able to say, these people that are now hostages for 598 days should come home first. We're strong enough.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing with us. Are there specific messages, specific action items? Because many will be watching this, whether they watch this on the cable television, whether they're watching this on YouTube, or whether they're receiving this as an email, over the course of the next few hours. What would be the recommendation? What can you share for them? Prayers, reaching out to their senators and their congressmen.
Mm-hmm.
Share with us, what are some of the action items that are necessary?
Well, there's still 4 Americans in captivity, right? We managed to get out Idan Alexander by putting a lot of pressure on the U.S. administration. Ever since President Trump was elected, we took upon ourselves to build relationship with his team. Steve Witkoff is a great guy, really understands the Jewish value of bringing back our people, and is extremely committed to it under the leadership of President Trump. Making sure nobody forgets. I think, at least here in the United States, hardly anybody knows that there are still 58 hostages and 4 out of them 4 Americans. And speaking about it, making sure people remember, putting pressure on people in Congress and on the administration. This pressure will bear fruit, and we gotta bring the kids back. And of course, people are asking us, Rona and Orna, what can we do for you? And we're saying, we are not in a legacy situation where we want to remember Omer and his leadership. And
we can't move on to that. What are you doing to commemorate Omer, to build his legacy? We can't. Right now, we're fighting to get him back. So at some point, we set up a GoFundMe to support that. Once we get him back, we can talk about legacy. We can do things in his honor, which we We really, really need that.
We gotta
We
grow
need to get there.
young,
you know?
young Jewish leaders like Omer. But first, our job is to do whatever we can to bring him back, and then we'll go back to whatever we can. And our Instagram is Bring Omer Home.
Follow us.
You can follow us.
There are different marches across Long Island. I don't know if people are aware. In Plainview, in Roslyn, in the 5 towns, every
Across the
week,
country.
and across the country. There are over 200 groups worldwide. March for Their Lives. Look them up.
Run for the lives.
Sorry, Run for Their Lives. Every week, marching and talking about the hostages, because that in itself has been such a struggle, right? The cycle of the news, it's been such a long time, fighting that cycle, making sure that they're remembered, making sure to put pressure on the administration that it's steady, that it's not, until they do come back, until they do come back.
We were so honored. Behind us, you have the blue sign. This is a sign that was put on the street next to our JCC here in Plainview, Long Island. And it says Captain Omer Neutra's Way. They renamed the street. We were very honored that they did that. But again, for us, the main goal right now is to release all the living hostages and all the deceased ones and bring them to burial, proper burial. And this is really where we focus and put all our energy. So we thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to your audience. And we gotta continue to support the IDF, support Israel, do whatever we can from here, from United States, to win this war and bring stability to the Middle East.
Thank you. Orna and Ronen, thank you very much.
Thank you.